Hi, I'm Gregg LeFevre, and this is the Compulsive Storyteller, a series of short personal true stories where we explore the idea that truth can be stranger than fiction. This week's story is entitled, My African Valentine. I hadn't been to a party in a while, and as I climbed the factory loft stairs, I was exhilarated to hear the music thumping away. I entered the loft directly into a crowd of dancers. At the edge of the dance floor, she towered above everyone. Her hair was done in thick dreads, with some sort of spheres strung into each strand a few inches apart. She stood head and shoulders above most of the party, yet no one had asked her to dance, so she moved to the rhythm of the music all by herself. Never having been afraid to walk up to anyone, I moved over to her, and amid the noise of the party, she had to bend down quite a ways, talk to little old 5'9" me. "I like your hair," I said. "It's wild." "Thank you," she said with an accent. I guessed she was from Africa. Her bright smile lit up her jet-black face. She told me her name was Adama, and she was from Senegal. "I'm afraid to ask you to dance because given your height, there's no way I could reach up high enough to twirl you around." "Try," she responded, and then managed to contort her body downward in such a way that it looked like I was leading and she was following. We danced until the wee hours, and then she shared her phone number with me. The next day, by early afternoon, I called and asked if she wanted to go out for dinner the following night. "Sure," she said, "but you know, tomorrow's Valentine's Day, right?" "Actually, I forgot that it was," I responded, "but since we barely know each other, why don't we just meet up for a nice dinner and forget all about the whole Valentine thing?" "Okay," she said. "Oh, and by the way," I asked, "how tall are you?" 6'4", she replied. To which I added, "Would you mind wearing flats?" "I'll think about it," she said. I chose Raoul's, a French place in the West Village, and had them save us a small table for two in the back, so we wouldn't be crammed in a line of tables opposite the bar in the front room. She arrived shortly after I did. As she walked in, everyone turned to observe her striking presence. Wearing very high red heels and a red satin tight-fitting sheath dress, with a heart-shaped opening in the bust line, revealing ample cleavage, she cut quite a figure. I responded to her presentation. "So much for ignoring Valentine's Day." She smiled broadly while the maitre d' helped her be seated. Even though she'd made a fool of me, I was still captivated by her smile. Later, when I got to know her better, I learned more about it. Some Senegalese women from the upper echelons of particular tribes have their gums tattooed black, so that when they smile, all that can be seen is their dark lips and teeth, and not their pink gums, hence the ultra-radiance of their smiles. We started to go out regularly to various events around New York, movies, museums, Broadway shows, and dance performances. She was great company. The three standout events for Adama were our visit to the Met's Oceanic Art Collection from the South Seas, which we both found amazing. The collection's huge abstract wooden figures were so fresh and contemporary they would have been very much at home at the Museum of Modern Art. The Benin bronzes, also at the Met, were another of her favorites. Some of them dated back to pre-Christian times, and their technical virtuosity and level of abstraction were astounding. Lastly, she loved the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, and in particular Judith Jamison, the then lead dancer who was also a tall black woman. As a dancer, Jamison invited Alvin Ailey's tenant to make his choreography her own. Adama definitely liked me. She had no trouble taking my arm or walking hand in hand in public. Hugging was okay too, although given our difference in heights, when we hugged, my face aligned perfectly with her breast. When I decided to bury my face there, I was summarily pushed backwards, so hard I was almost flattened. Next, I decided to be a little proactive on the romantic front. One night when we met up, I brought along an attaché case and wouldn't tell her why I'd brought it. When it came time to say goodnight at her front door, I produced a small, folding step stool, which I stood on top of. While she found my antics amusing and did give me a kiss, it turned out to be a dry, tight-lipped little peck on my lips. I decided that maybe a trip to an exotic place would ignite some romance. After looking at a bunch of travel brochures, we decided on the Caribbean, and in particular, the island of St. John in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which I knew well because I'd vacationed there with my parents when I was young. Its real attraction was that most of the volcanic island was national park, and its steep jungle slopes were largely undeveloped. Lawrence Rockefeller had purchased the island in the early 1950s and then donated large sections of it to the federal government to become a national park. While taking a huge tax write-off for the gift, he also wisely kept one of the choicest parts of the island, Keneal Bay, for a Rockefeller family private resort, which was surrounded by a national park that could never be developed. When we arrived at Cruz Bay, I rented motorbikes for both of us, but almost immediately one of them broke down. Since there were no others available, we had to double up on a single bike. Adama insisted that she drive with me sitting behind. We made for a comical picture as we continued on a hair-raising ride along the narrow, winding mountain ridge road that ran from Cruz Bay to Coral Bay at the other end of the island. After our bike ride, we headed for the accommodations I reserved at a lovely circular complex of A-frame cabins that were set on a beautiful point of land just outside of town. This was the first time together that we encountered any obvious racism. In New York, the varied population in close quarters made overt racism less common, but the A-frame settlement on the island was mostly filled with Texans. Just after checking in, one of them asked Adama if she could bring some clean towels to their room. They seemed confused when she refused, telling them that she was a guest. A little later, when we changed into our bathing suits and were sitting on the front porch of our unit, she looked at the jacuzzi and asked me, "Why don't you time how long it will take me to clear everyone out of the jacuzzi?" With that, she walked majestically down to the circular bubbling pool filled with white Texans. It took less than a minute for all of them to climb out. I had to respect her unwavering attitude, and that she could still maintain a sense of humor when she encountered such situations. Later, we decided to go dancing in town, and she wanted to go to a club frequented by the native community. Being an older white man, I felt a little uneasy about dancing with Adama in a club filled with black people, but I could see that my attitude was prejudicial, so I agreed to go. We were certainly watched by everyone, and it wasn't long before someone tapped me on the shoulder and cut in. Adama didn't object, so I found myself standing alone at the edge of the crowd. There was a young guy with long dreads moving to the music next to me at the edge of the crowd. I said to him, "How you doing?" He responded with a thumbs up and a big smile, saying, "Not as good as you, man." We went to the sand beach at Trunk Bay every day, and Adama sat in the shallow, gently lapping surf, scrubbing her skin with wet sand. This was something she'd learned in Senegal. When some of the other female bathers were curious about what she was up to, she convinced them that sand scrubbing was the secret to her blemishless, soft skin.